to For the First Time in Forever, the show that aims to fill the gaps in all of our watch lists. Last week, we took a stroll over to the East End of London. That was an awful accent. In Guy Ritchie's crime caper classic, Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels. And if you haven't seen that video, you can check it out by clicking the link in the description below. This week, we go from the streets of London to the front lines of Vietnam as I sat and watched yet another Stanley Kubrick classic. This is Full Metal Jacket. Wait a second. I am going to be talking about spoilers for this film, so consider this your warning now.
What have we got here? A fucking comedian, private joker. I admire your honesty. Hell, I like you. You can come over to my house and my sister. You little scumbag. I got your name. I got your ass. You will not laugh. You will not cry. You will learn by the numbers. I will teach you. Now get up. Get on your feet. You had best yourself or I will unscrew your head and shut down your neck.
Stanley Kubrick is a filmmaker who I have certainly changed my tune about over the course of this series. Prior to deeply engrossing myself in his work, I used to find his approach very cold and clinical, focused on experiential filmmaking rather than characters and story. Like I said, I have now done a complete 180 on this stance. Like, 2001, I now put that alongside some of my favourite movies of all time. And Full Metal Jacket seemed to promise yet another sensational accomplishment for Kubrick, and a film that I would yet again probably fawn over in awe of his work. But I didn't. For me, of the Kubrick films that I have seen so far, this one was probably the least impressive. Full Metal Jacket is set at the height of the Vietnam War. The film opens in a remote camp as a group of recruits begin their training under the furious leadership of Gunnery Sergeant Hartman. As we see the group develop, Kubrick soon cuts away from training, specifically following Matthew Modine's Joker, as a war reporter documenting the ongoing battle on the front lines. Let's kick things off with my one main critique of the film, a factor that bears the brunt of my disappointment. Kubrick opens his film focusing on a select bunch of recruits and their time spent in basic training. Now, I'll go into that segment in detail shortly, but soon after the culmination of that act, Kubrick jumps forward in time, following Joker into the flames of war. My problem is that this opening feels like its own contained story, and that by jumping forward in time, it feels as if we've just completely thrown that opening to the side, have gone, right, now cool, we'll dust our hands with that, let's get into war. And I thought that was a real shame, because this opening act is electric. It features one of the strongest openings to any film I've ever seen, as R. Lee Ermey thunders his way onto screen as the belting, foul-mouthed comedic genius Drill Sergeant.
You're so ugly you could be a modern art masterpiece.
The fact that Ermey completely improvised all of those outlandish insults even blew Kubrick himself away, which, if you know a lot about Kubrick, he's a tough nut to crack. But here specifically is where Kubrick unveils his opening act's true intention in the form of Vincent D'Onofrio's Private Pile. A relatively out-of-shape man doing what he can to simply survive basic training, but finds himself the personal bitch of Sergeant Hartman. What initially seems to be nothing more than spiteful name-calling and playground bully tactics from Hartman soon evolves into a ticking time bomb with Private Pile ready to explode any minute. Now typically, in most war films, especially ones focusing on the Vietnam War, filmmakers love to depict the horrors of war. What made Full Metal Jacket that bit more unique was that Kubrick is outlining the horrors of war way before we even arrive on the battlefield. The act culminates in Pyle being pushed to the edge, murdering Hartman, and eventually blowing his brains out. Shocking, hard-hitting, all deliberately executed for Kubrick to launch his diatribe against war as a whole, starting with the vicious nature of basic training. How soldiers are immediately stripped of any humanity, corralled and sheared like animals, and transformed into ruthless killing machines. The problem that Kubrick illustrates is, where did the military draw that line? and how their techniques could push a man to the brink. Now that, in its own confines, would make for a great short film, and in some respect, it does behave like that, because immediately after, bang, welcome to Vietnam. Of course, with any Kubrick film, conventional narratives get thrown out the window, but here, I feel as if we needed that connective tissue for this story to actually feel like a story rather than two separate films. As for the remainder of the film, I mean, it's really impressive. It takes a while to get going because I didn't find the whole war reporter angle all that interesting, but when Kubrick gets down to the nitty-gritty war scenes, it's Kubrick doing what he does best. Directing the absolute crap out of scenes that if someone told me I was in charge of, I wouldn't know where to begin. In this half of the movie, as well as tense action, Kubrick unleashes a scathing attack on the Vietnam War itself. Looking back on the war over 45 years later, almost any historian will tell you that it was a pointless war filled with needless bloodshed and neither side being the heroes they assumed they were, and Kubrick explicitly tapped into that mentality. He's immensely critical of the American military, and around the film's release pissed off a lot of flag-waving, gun-toting patriots in the process. In the scenes where Joker is searching for a news story, his commander explains that the best kind of story typically features dead Viet Cong. On their way to the battlefield, Joker and Rafterman encounter a machine gunner, mowing down innocent women, children, and farmers simply for sport. And he also comments on the fact that the majority of soldiers had no idea what they were fighting for, but because someone higher up told them to, they just followed orders. And in typical Kubrick fashion, the battle sequences are very tense, with a fine-tuned attention to detail, particularly in the remarkable set design. By the power of movie magic, Kubrick successfully transformed an old and abandoned gasworks in the London East End into charred and desolate Vietnamese towns. I would say out of every component in all of Kubrick's works, his set design is unparalleled to any other filmmaker. But yet again, we run into the same issue. It feels like two separate movies. The second half doesn't even call back to that opening act, aside from Joker running into Cowboy again, and lacks a fundamental sense of engagement to these characters. I understand Kubrick's direction from a stylistic sense, but narratively, it didn't work for me. Also, having seen the film a few days ago from when I'm recording this, it really hasn't stuck with me. Something that I can say the complete opposite of about the other Kubrick films that I've seen. In my honest opinion, Full Metal Jacket was nowhere near as impactful as other Kubrick films. On a technical scale, Kubrick is operating on an entirely different level, and his overarching criticism of the Vietnam War is deeply stimulating. However, I can't shake the fact that it felt like I was watching two separate films. One a intense 40-minute movie about the horrors of basic training, and one a slightly less impactful hour 10-minute movie on the Vietnam War. And then you combine them together, it never felt like I watched one complete hour 55-minute movie. So, after watching Full Metal Jacket for the first time in forever, it's a good film, but I think in regards to all of the other Kubrick works, it's not urgent. Anyway guys, those were my thoughts on Full Metal Jacket. Let me know, have you seen the film yet? Is it one of Kubrick's best in your opinions, or are you kind of on my side where you're like, it's probably one of the weaker ones that I at least have seen from him so far? But as always, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. But before you go, here is a little teaser for next week's episode. Hello, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have, make sure to click that like button, and if you aren't already, click that subscribe button too.